James Bell here, the Boxing Source, and coming through with another video. And this one here is to talk about the article that was put out through Boxing Scene in reference to Deontay Wilder. And the headline goes that Deontay Wilder claims that he is the only one in the top 5 to give Wilder-Ortiz the opportunity. He did in the past claim that he would bless Wilder-Ortiz with the opportunity to fight him for the WBC heavyweight championship. And this was, back in 2017. Of course, the fight actually took place in March of 2018. But if you remember the situation back in 2017, Deontay Wilder had come back from injuries to his arm and shoulder, had surgery back in 2016, came back in 2017, had a fight in February against Gerald Washington, was able to win that fight by knockout, and then was basically setting up to having a fight with this mandatory at the time, which was Bermane Stiverne. Over the summer, they couldn't necessarily get a deal done with Bermane Stiverne, and he kind of made things to where he would rather be going up against Wilder-Ortiz at that scheduled date in November in 2017. But we know the situation with Wilder-Ortiz, with him not filling out the paperwork properly in reference to his medication or whatever it was. So he got scrapped out of that November date, and Deontay Wilder ended up facing Bermane Stiverne on that November date at the Barclays Center. And then later on down the line, he did end up facing Wilder-Ortiz on March 3rd, 2018 over at the Barclays Center. Here, on this article on Boxing Scene, he says that in the first fight that took place in March 2018, he claims that he was, ill going into that particular fight, and that was part of a factor in why he was not in top condition against Wilder-Ortiz at the Barclays Center. But we've had, other reports out there going into that particular fight that Wilder-Ortiz had barely been cleared to fight, and that there were, a couple of fighters that were on standby just in case if Ortiz was not cleared by doctors to actually go through with the fight. That's number one. And the other thing is that, with Wilder claiming that he's the only one in the top 5 to give Wilder-Ortiz the opportunity, that is a fallacy. And there have been many times over that I've stated that Wilder-Ortiz has basically been a myth in the heavyweight division. We've seen how he has gotten through in the heavyweight division for the majority of his career, going back to 2014, where you had that instance that he defeated Latif KO for that interim WBA heavyweight championship, but that ended up being a no contest due to the positive test that came up after the fight. And then ever since then, his wins have come up against the guys like Byron Pauly, Matthias Ariel Redondo, Tony Thompson in March 2016, Brian Jennings, Malik Scott, David Allen, Daniel Martz. Then you had that first fight with Deontay Wilder. Then following that, you had Rajvan Kajanu and Travis Kaufman, and then Christian Hammer. Now, there have been multiple fighters within the heavyweight division that have had much better resumes within the heavyweight division than Wilder-Ortiz. And they've had multiple claims that guys have quote-unquote ducked Luis Ortiz when there has been evidence that has been to the contrary. For example, within the past year, you had Dillian Whyte trying to get a fight with Luis Ortiz, but Luis Ortiz preferred to be part of the December 1st card over in the Staples Center, where he ended up fighting Travis Kauffman instead of headlining in a bout that would have been in the O2 Arena against Dillian Whyte. Then this year, when Anthony Joshua was supposed to fight Jarrell Miller, and Jarrell Miller had to basically be scrapped out due to his positive test through multiple substances that he took, Luis Ortiz had the opportunity to be part of that card that was on June 1st in Madison Square Garden. But due to contract issues and communication issues, they couldn't make that fight happen. And so that, along with the guarantee or the announcement of Deontay Wilder announcing that he would be fighting Luis Ortiz this year, kind of like scrapped Ortiz from being part of a fight between him and Anthony Joshua. So that is just part of where the whole fallacies go about when it comes to Deontay Wilder saying that, oh, I'm the only one that, gave Luis Ortiz the opportunity with the guy that's ranked within the top 5. When you had Dillian Whyte and you had Anthony Joshua having offers for them to fight Luis Ortiz. Now, there was also that instance where Luis Ortiz had been positioned to be the mandatory for the WBA Heavyweight Championship, and he could have waited back in 2017. He could have waited to be fighting Anthony Joshua for that WBA and IBF championship when he had those, when Joshua had those titles when he won against Vladimir Klitschko. He knew the situation with the mandatory position with the IBF and the WBA. All he had to do was wait it out. But he didn't wait it out. He chose to go ahead and face Deontay Wilder for the WBC heavyweight title. And not only that, he already made the move towards facing Deontay Wilder when he signed with Al Haymon and Al Haymon's Boxing in March of 2017, before the fight took place between Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko. So he already took himself out of that equation when he signed with Al Haymon back in 2017, before the fight between Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko took place. So for Ortiz to actually make that move when he was already affiliated with Matchroom Boxing before he signed with Al Haymon, kind of like set the stage for him not to face Anthony Joshua, but to face Deontay Wilder instead. So that kind of goes into what went down in reference to Luis Ortiz and this whole thing about him being the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, and all of these top guys are scared to fight him, when the evidence shows otherwise. That Luis Ortiz had the chance to fight Anthony Joshua either back in 2017 or the beginning of 2018, but when he made that decision to sign with Al Haymon, that set the stage for him to not fight Anthony Joshua, but to fight Deontay Wilder. So this whole thing about what Deontay Wilder has said on Boxing Scene here pretty much doesn't, come close to being true in my eyes, because the evidence shows that Luis Ortiz and his team made the moves to, instead of fighting Anthony Joshua, when Anthony Joshua was an IBF and WBA champion, he went ahead and made those moves to go ahead and fight Deontay Wilder instead. So that's pretty much what I'm seeing here with this thing that Deontay Wilder has said through boxing scene, and he's trying to, build up this rematch that's happening on Saturday, November 23rd, over in Las Vegas. It's going to be, rematch between Wilder and Ortiz, and I don't think it's going to be much of a fight. If it makes it longer than 3 rounds, I'll pretty much be surprised, but that's what I got in reference to this particular article and my reaction to that article. You could subscribe to the Boxing Source on YouTube and catch the Boxing Source radio show live on Blog Talk Radio, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. On that note, folks, I'm out. Peace.